Welcome to Kolme Group's Clarizen function in the Flash, where each episode we introduce you to a new Clarizen function and show you how to use it. Hi, I'm Kim Messenger, one of the founders of Kolme Group. I'm a certified project manager, and I've built and run project delivery organizations, and I've been configuring Clarizen since 2015.
Hey, I'm John Mallory, also a PMP with a master's in IT management. I enjoy solving business problems with Clarizen workflows and teaching others to do the same.
All right, John, what function are you looking at today?
Today, we're looking at IsManuallySet.
That's a good one. What can you tell us about IsManuallySet?
Well, IsManuallySet is a way to evaluate whether a Clarizen calculated field has been overwritten by a direct update. So if it has been, it returns true. If it hasn't, it returns false.
That's pretty simple. So the syntax is simply IsManuallySet, and you put the field name in brackets. Can I use any calculated field in this function?
Not the formula fields, but any Clarizen calculated field, fields that get calculated through the out-of-box features of the application, such as actual revenue or the end date of a project, those kinds of fields.
Super.
So for example, IsManuallySet actual revenue would return true if the actual revenue is being calculated as an aggregation of all the labor and non-labor revenue across the project. So as people log time and their time has a bill rate, that would get calculated and added to the actual revenue for the project. So it would return true if someone made a direct update to the actual revenue, like went into the actual revenue on the property card and just changed it to $12,000 manually.
Right. And that's a pretty neat feature of Clarizen, that you can actually manipulate some of these out-of-the-box calculations. So for example, track status or project status is something that is automatically calculated by Clarizen that will give you a red, yellow, green indicator based on how well you're progressing to your plan. And if you just leave it to auto-calculate, it will show red, yellow, green, depending on if you're on track or off track or at risk. It'll change that status. But Clarizen gives you the ability to say, as project manager, I can override that status field and I can say, well, it says it's yellow, but actually I know we're going to be green. And so you can manually change that state or status rather. And what this function does is it lets us, using our business rules, to determine if that is something that's manually set by a person or if Clarizen's doing the math.
That's right. It's also important to point out that a custom action or workflow rule could also make a direct update to a field like actual revenue. For example, like I could have a custom action that prompts the user for a revenue and then updates the actual revenue field. And then the IsManuallySet would return true in that case, because that's overriding the out-of-box way that Clarizen would normally calculate revenue.
So IsManuallySet is if a human is manually setting it or a business rule manually sets it.
That is correct.
Do you have an example you can share with us?
Sure. So the use case that I came up with for this example is one where the PMO leader has noticed that project managers are just going to the property card and extending the end date of their projects without keeping good hygiene on the project schedule. So he wanted to add a validation rule that prevents users from just coming in here directly and changing the due date for the project. So if I come here and I try to say, well, we're going to push this out another week, then you'll get this validation rule that prevents you from doing it.
That's great, because ideally the project manager will go to the work plan and adjust the tasks within the project to push out the due date rather than just directly changing the due date and you don't know why the date is being pushed out.
That's right. So I can do the update through through a child task, and that would push the due date out, and the workflow rule would accept that, the validation rule.
Super. Can you show us how it works?
Yeah, so here's the example of this configuration that we've done to prevent users from being able to manually set the due date. The evaluation criteria is if the due date has changed and IsManuallySet is true, then we show the error message. The evaluation actually runs after the change has been made. So at that point, IsManuallySet has already been set to true. And so it will trigger this error message and prevent the user from being able to make that update.
Very good. So that's a nice way to, when you need to, control some of that extent, that flexibility that Clarizen has in the name of good governance.
That's right. So here are some important points to remember. First of all, IsManuallySet only applies to fields that are auto-calculated. Here's some examples: start date, due date, status, percent complete. Many of the revenue and cost fields like budgeted cost or budgeted revenue, actual cost, actual revenue, most of those are auto-calculated. The custom action or workflow rule that overwrites the out-of-box method of calculating a field's value will return true, just as if it was done via direct user input. And finally, a field that has been manually set cannot be reset via a business rule. It can only be restored directly by a user. So if I go in directly to the actual revenue field and change it to $12,000, for example, Clarizen will not continue to auto-calculate that field even if a change is made. If somebody reports time that adds revenue to the project, it will not change that actual revenue field, and you cannot restore it to its auto-calculated value through a configuration.
That's a good point. So if I change that, or if I change the status to something, it will no longer automatically update that. It assumes, okay, the project managers decided they're going to manually update this field, so we won't override it. And one thing that this function does is it can tell us if it was manually overridden. But as you say, there's no way today in Clarizen to reset that and let it automatically be recalculated. You can do it manually through the UI, but not through an automation.
Yes, so one thing that you can do is run a report that IsManuallySet flag is available as a filter in reports. So if I wanted to see, do I have any projects where the project manager has manually set the actual revenue, for example, I could use that as a filter on the project object in a report, find all those fields, make the report editable, and restore them directly from the report.
Super.
So a few things to remember: if you use in conjunction with IsChanged, IsManuallySet is evaluating the state of the field after the change and not before. There's not a way to evaluate whether a field was previously manually set, only its current state. And as we mentioned on the previous slide, IsManuallySet is available as a filter in reports, which can be very handy.
And that is manually set. Thank you for walking us through that, John.
You're very welcome. That was fun.
It was. If you have more questions on this function, you can hit us up at kolmegroup.com and we'll be able to help you, or comment below. If you found this video useful and are really ready to take your Clarizen skills to the next level, check out the link below for Kolme University, or reach out to us for individual consulting and training for you and your organization.